The air was thick with the weight of Hitler's words, each syllable dripping with venom as he stood before the sea of faces, their eyes locked on him like a congregation, before a dark prophet. "We will rise," Hitler declared, his voice cutting through the silence, "and those who stand in our way will be crushed beneath the heel of destiny." The men around him, their uniforms sharp, their expressions unyielding, nodded in grim approval. They were the architects of his madness, the hands that would shape his nightmares into reality. No one dared to question. No one dared to hesitate. The world would bend or it would break, and they would be the ones to ensure it. In that moment, the fate of millions hung on the words of a man who saw himself as more than human, and the men who believed him. Rudolf Hess sat in the dimly lit room, his eyes fixed on the man who had become his idol. Hitler's words were like fire, igniting something deep within him. Every speech, every command, every twisted vision. Hess absorbed it all, his loyalty hardening into something unshakable. He wasn't just a follower. He was the devoted deputy, the man who would carry out orders without question, without hesitation. There was no room for doubt in Hess's mind. Hitler's rants weren't just speeches. They were revelations. And Hess, he was the disciple, the one who would turn those dark dreams into reality. If Hitler said jump, Hess wouldn't ask how high. He'd already be in the air. That was the kind of devotion that made him indispensable, the kind that made him dangerous. Because when a man believes that blindly, there's no line he won't cross. Hermann Göring had always been a man with a hunger for power, and when the Nazi Party began its ascent, he saw his chance. He wasn't just going to watch from the sidelines, no. He was going to grab hold of it with both hands. Hitler's vision was intoxicating, a promise of glory and control, and Göring knew exactly how to play the game. He aligned himself with the Führer, proving his loyalty at every turn, and it paid off. The ranks of the Luftwaffe opened up before him, and he climbed them with ruthless efficiency. This wasn't just about serving his country. It was about securing his own place at the top. And Göring wasn't the kind of man to settle for anything less. Heinrich Himmler wasn't the kind of man who commanded attention at first glance. He was slight, unassuming, with a quiet demeanor that made him easy to overlook. But behind those round glasses and that unremarkable face lay a mind that would shape the very foundations of the Nazi regime. He didn't storm into power. He slipped in, methodical and patient, climbing the ranks with a bureaucrat's precision. By the time the world took notice, it was too late. Himmler had already woven himself into the heart of the SS, transforming it from a mere security force into an instrument of terror. He didn't just follow orders. He designed them, crafting systems of control and cruelty with chilling efficiency. The atrocities that would stain history forever, they bore his signature, his vision. A man who seemed so ordinary had become the architect of something monstrous, and the world would never be the same. Joseph Goebbels was a man of sharp intellect and sharper words. With a mind that could twist truth into whatever shape he needed, he became the architect of Nazi propaganda. He knew how to play on fears, how to stoke anger, and how to make lies sound like gospel. Under his guidance, the Nazi message spread like wildfire, turning neighbors against neighbors and poisoning the hearts of a nation. He didn't just sell hate. He made it sound like salvation. And in doing so, he helped pave the way for one of history's darkest chapters. Reinhard Heydrich wasn't just another high-ranking Nazi officer. He was the architect of terror, a man whose name alone sent shivers down the spines of those who knew what he was capable of. Cold, calculating, and utterly ruthless, he didn't just follow orders. He designed them, turning the machinery of death into something efficient, something systematic. Under his command, the Holocaust wasn't just chaos. It was a well-oiled operation, a factory of horror where millions were marked for extermination. He didn't just oversee the killings. He perfected them, refining the process until it was as clinical as it was cruel. His legacy wasn't just one of power, but of pure, unrelenting evil, a stain on history that could never be washed clean. Martin Bormann wasn't the kind of man who stood in the spotlight. He didn't need to. While others shouted speeches and marched in parades, he worked quietly, his fingers wrapped around the levers of power.
in
Every law
1940,
that passed,
the
every promotion handed out,
1957
it all
Congress
flowed through him.
modifies the
The
right.
Nazi regime was a puppet show, and Bormann, he was the one holding the strings. You'd never see his name in the headlines, but that was by design. He didn't want fame, he wanted control, and he had it. If you wanted something done in the party, you went through Bormann. If you wanted to climb the ranks, you kissed his ring. He didn't just influence decisions, he made them, then stepped back as others took the credit or the blame. It was all part of the game. The louder they were, the easier it was for him to move unseen. And by the time anyone realized how deep his reach went, it was already too late. The machine was his, and he made sure it stayed that way. Hitler's. Mein Kampf wasn't just a book, it was a blueprint for hatred. Written in the 1920s while he was in prison, it laid out his vision for a Nazi Germany built on racism and violence. The pages dripped with anti-Semitism, painting Jews as the enemy of the Aryan race, which he claimed was superior. He ranted about expanding German territory, crushing democracy, and creating a totalitarian state where only the pure would thrive. It wasn't just theory either. This book became the foundation for the horrors that followed. Schools taught it, soldiers carried it, and millions were brainwashed by its poison. Mein Kampf wasn't just words on paper, it was the first step toward genocide. The world was crumbling, banks collapsed, jobs vanished, and families went hungry. The Great Depression had gripped the globe, and Germany was no exception. People were desperate, angry, and looking for answers. That's when Adolf Hitler stepped into the spotlight. He spoke with fire, promising jobs, stability, and national pride. The Nazis blamed the country's woes on the Treaty of Versailles, the Communists, and the Jews. It was a simple message, but it resonated. The people wanted someone to blame, and Hitler gave them targets. By 1932, the Nazi Party had become the largest in the Reichstag. The old politicians were scrambling, trying to hold on to power, but the people had made their choice. In January 1933, President Hindenburg, reluctantly, appointed Hitler as chancellor. It was supposed to be a way to control him, to keep him in check. But no one saw what was coming. Hitler didn't just want power. He wanted total control. And with the country on its knees, he was about to get it. The streets were quiet that night, but behind closed doors, the storm was already raging. Hitler had made his move, and the SS, loyal only to him, carried out his orders with brutal efficiency. One by one, the leaders of the SA, the stormtroopers who had once been the muscle of the Nazi Party, were dragged from their homes, their offices, their beds. Some were shot on the spot, others taken to makeshift prisons where their fate was already sealed. Ernst Röhm, once a close ally, was arrested in his hotel room, his defiance crumbling under the weight of betrayal. He was given a choice, a gun to take his own life. But when he refused, the decision was made for him. The sound of gunfire echoed through the halls, a grim punctuation to the end of an era. By dawn, the purge was nearly complete. Hundreds had been killed, their bodies left as warnings to anyone who might dare challenge Hitler's rule. The message was clear. There was no room for dissent, no tolerance for rivals. The Night of the Long Knives wasn't just about eliminating threats. It was about sending a chill through the hearts of anyone who might think of standing in his way. And as the sun rose, the world watched, some in horror, others in silent approval. But no one could deny what had just happened. Hitler had tightened his grip on Germany, and the path ahead was darker than anyone could have imagined. The stage was set, and the worst was yet to come. The men who stood closest to Hitler weren't just followers. They were architects of something far worse than war. They didn't just obey orders. They shaped them, twisted them into something monstrous. Himmler, with his cold eyes and obsession with purity, didn't just enforce the final solution. He refined it, turned it into a machine of death, so efficient it still chills the blood. Goebbels didn't just spread lies. He made people believe them, made them want to believe them, until the truth itself seemed like the enemy. And then there was Bormann, the shadow man, the one who made sure the gears kept turning. No matter how many bodies got caught in them, they knew. They all knew. The camps, the massacres, the endless suffering. They didn't just look away. They built it. And when the end came, when the walls closed in, they didn't beg for mercy. They ran, they hid, some even took the easy way out. But the truth, that never ran. That never hid. It just waited, heavy and unshakable, for the world to remember what they'd done.